So I'm Harriet Truss. I work in the code manager and the change management team. Some of you will come across me before in that perspective. Andrew's talked before about the changes that have taken through the code drafting, and I've been working on those. But I'm going to talk to you more about the change management a bit more generally, and the transition as we go through to go live. So it's a little bit smaller at the top there, but so over a year ago now, a change freeze was agreed in the programme to basically protect all that hard work that we talked about, the design, the details, the code drafting, and that needs protecting for that stability, for the implementation, through qualification and migration. And so a change freeze is agreed to make sure to de-risk kind of running up to that go live, and also afterwards. And obviously, you know, the rest of the world continues, there are changes that come into the process, and we need to make sure we're not progressing kind of the BAU, business as usual changes, in a way that would impact MHHS. So that's where the change freeze comes from, and that's where the change freeze in the programme, where it's only after a certain point that changes to the design and the code drafting were allowed, the kind of absolutely essential things, and that kind of is reflected and enhanced even more as we get to the issue we were talking about before, issue 241. Part of that does relate specifically to technical changes. So from a REC perspective, the services that are counted as central systems for the programme are the central switching service, EES, and the electricity retail data service as well. And there's also consequential impact for the security data exchange service because of the platform it sits on with ECOs as well. So you may be aware, depending on how close you are to the change processes and things that are coming through, we do have some changes that are on hold at the moment for exactly these reasons. Change freeze kind of is associated with up to M10, but we've never taken the approach that we'll put them on hold and we won't pick them up again until that go live point. We're constantly looking at them, and particularly now with the shift back of the go live date, we're kind of re-looking, prioritising and making sure that if we can pick things, it's not just about the implementation, we can start doing some of the solution development, the impact assessments, those kind of things can start to progress. At the minute, nothing's been lifted off hold, but we're hoping to get to that point in the next month. So kind of in relation to the change freeze, but also kind of a general approach for change within the REC, kind of up to MHHS go live, you know, the design, the target operating model is very much kind of owned by the programme, and any kind of proposed changes that we have going through the REC, we need to make sure that they're not kind of going to be impacting that design, as I said. So that's something that kind of we've looked at as with every change that's come through, and it's kind of something that and as I say, every change that's raised, whether it's an issue or a change proposal, we're looking at it through the lens of kind of MHHS. If it was kind of, this is past now, but you know, if it was touching the sides of the MHHS design, we'd have those conversations, consider a change request into the programme. Part of the preparation for that is the DIP manager and the DIP rules are part of the cross-code steering group. That's something that some of you may not be aware of, but the code bodies working together, making sure we're aligning and coordinating on changes that are related. So DIP manager is now actively part of that. Kind of from M8 to M10, so from M8 and M10, so M8 being the kind of the code go live element, M10 being the system. Essentially the design is reflected in the code drafting. Andrew's kind of talked through that earlier. And it's kind of sits with the code bodies. But as I said, qualification, migration, they still need to be protected. So the way we're working kind of will continue, but we'll do it in a kind of across the code bodies, with the programme, with the DIP manager. Those conversations will be ongoing. And the kind of, as we get closer to early life support, we're looking at how that all works kind of across the code bodies, where we need to make sure that we're not impacting and when the changes come through in that phase. But it's something that we're all talking about a lot at the moment, and it isn't bottomed out yet, but we are doing so. And then M15 onwards, well, it's all BAUs, 3 bullet points there, but it's basically everything becomes normal, and it will be part of the BAU process, and we'll be all used to talking to each other even more. So as I mentioned, in the rec change management, we've been working for a while now, making sure we're considering MHHS. So everything gets looked at, everything now that any solutions we're developing, any impact assessments, business cases we need to look at for the now, but also what those processes look like when it's in the MHHS world. The programme have a horizon scanning process, so any changes that get raised, I feed those through, other code bodies feed those through into that process to make sure that there's visibility across the board to help with all of that production of the programme going live. As I say, and I think it's a repeating theme, we're talking to the DIP manager, we're talking to the programme, we're talking to other code bodies all the time to make sure the changes that are coming through our process are appropriately considering those. And then obviously DIP manager is new kid on the block, we need to know how to work with each other, and we're working with the DIP manager to understand those interactions and where they feed into impact assessments and things like that. So, governance transition. So this slide is more about the in the programme, the governance, the programme governance and how the code bodies are working together. At M10 will shift because from a code perspective, the code work stream's been working together for the drafting. But as I say, there are things that will continue to impact as we go forward. So there's two sides to this really. There's changes and issues that are coming out of MHHS, going live, early migrations, and those will continue to be identified, we imagine, up to go live and possibly kind of in the early stages. And there are changes that kind of will be discussed within the programme. We need to understand how those will be handed off to BAU and how those will go through the governance process. Again, it's something that we're working through in the programme to make sure we know how to do that. And then, again, there's the BAU changes where we need to make sure that we're not impacting that qualification and migration. That's really just a kind of a reiteration of that. So we'll be, talking to the programme about those kind of things, making sure, still ongoing, as I mentioned, that the changes coming in aren't going to adversely affect qualification testing. So CSS messages in qualification testing, we do have a change on hold at the moment for exactly those reasons, things like that. And from a programme perspective, we've been talking to them about how they also feed into our impact assessment process to make sure that it's understood kind of the impact of their plans, the migration, control and everything like that. And they're looking at how that looks in their new operating model, new adapted operating model for Go Live, because obviously they will shift. There were some things they won't need to do anymore. So I think the key theme is we're looking at it all the time. We're making sure that we're talking to people across the programme, DIP manager, and that every change is understood in that context, but also that we're feeding in at the right phases of changes. I think that's me.
Okay, Harriet, a couple of questions, if that's okay. Mm-hmm. So the first one, just thinking about the change freeze, and is that going to apply across all the impacted codes?
So the change freeze, the programme change freeze was kind of, applicable to kind of the programme, the design, but in that also all of the code bodies. So DCUSA and BSc is kind of across the board. Everybody's kind of made sure they're not making changes that aren't entirely necessary.
Okay. I'm just seeing if there's any follow-up there. And then a further question for you. So CRs that are on hold. So on hold CRs did not go through IA, impact assessment, I guess, so may have an impact at Go Live that is unknown. How are these being picked up and validated and urgency assessed?
Okay, so there's two types of on hold that are being talked about here. That's a different one to what I was just talking about. So we in the REC have some change proposals on hold in our change register. And they're the ones I was just talking about before. the on-hold change requests in the programme are programme change requests where they've got to a certain point on them, agreed that they're not needed for go live, and that they needed to be handed over to the code bodies in some way. So, I may defer slightly to Andrew here, but effectively, we're quite comfortable that there aren't any landing in the wreck, she says, hopefully. No, there aren't loads of them, but it's an ongoing conversation, and we're working through that at the moment, essentially.
I think that's exactly right. So I think our understanding is that there, of those on hold changes, there's a five or 10, that none of those are kind of REC impacting, but we have, in the context of this being discussed at PSG earlier in the month, have asked the programme to confirm. Our expectation is that the programme is talking to those people who've got the on-hold change request and advising them to kind of raise those through kind of BAU processes. And we are kind of discussing with the programme that if there are any changes that impact the REC, we'd really like to have that conversation with the programme so we can understand some of the background related to those changes.